Hey, this is Tony Jones for the Hardest Question on Trinity Sunday.
And this is the Reverend Russell. And we had one other person who was supposed to be with us, but it's just the two of us here today. We have no Trinity for you.
But it's funny, Russell, that the gospel lesson today is what most people think of as the Great Commission,
Right, yeah.
but it's used on Trinity Sunday in the lectionary because it's the only time that Jesus says anything even closely resembling this doctrine on which the entire church pivots. The Trinity, that God is a triune relationship of three divine persons.
Right. And so then that is always very important. And in seminary, of course, you really have to parse it out, and you have to,
the economic Trinity versus the imminent Trinity.
Right. And it's very important. And what I want to know is okay, we're preaching this, right? Why is this important? I mean, really, honestly, what is who you're praying to, or know how God has manifest God's self in the world, and why is it important to understand God as a Trinity?
Well, the way I love the Trinity.
Yeah, and I know that you do.
Whether or not it has a great deal of scriptural evidence backing it up, I still love it. I think it's beautiful and fun and makes for great hymns and things like that.
Really good, liturgical art.
Yeah, or even for isn't there a reason that all movies have 3 acts?
Yes, totally. It just makes more sense.
It makes more sense. Things in threes, or any comedian tells a good but-um.
Right, that's right. Yeah, and you can't have 4 callbacks. You can only have 3.
Of course,
4 doesn't work.
Yeah. So I love the Trinity for those reasons, and I think that the question of how much it matters.
Yeah.
Goes back, I think, it really mattered in the early church.
It really did.
And I think it's because whether you were a Jew and you thought of Yahweh, you couldn't even pronounce God's name, or whether you were somebody who held to a Hellenistic philosophy like Augustine, who then converted to Christianity. Even for Augustine, God was this untouchable idea that hovered off in the universe, and suddenly you're confronted with a God who walked around and had smelly armpits or whatever.
Yeah, but so
the Trinity makes sense of that complexity.
Exactly, and what it also needs to make sense of is the fact that you used to have this guy you used to be able to sit down and have a conversation with, but he's gone now.
But he's still around, kind of. Yeah.
So you don't want to go back to that untouchable God. That God that you could talk to. Yeah. And great, but he goes away. So we get another advocate.
So my question is, I think what's tricky for a lot of us today is that idea of God as separate, untouchable, that idea, if you're not an Orthodox Jew, that idea that you couldn't say the name Yahweh without being stoned to death or whatever, that we're like, of course you can say the name, that's ridiculous. Or the Greek idea that God is this immaterial being that isn't really involved in the world. That also seems ridiculous.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think it's why some people wonder where's the place of the Trinity. I mean, I think that's a question that a lot of preachers will have to wrestle with on this Sunday.
Right, because we feel like we have access. Maybe we just have access to only one part of the Trinity that we just, it's I don't know. Why is it important? That's a good question.
I don't know that there's a harder question than that.
Actually, why is the Trinity so important? I like Jesus a lot. Holy Spirit, excellent. God the Creator, that's all fine. But that's how I have been taught to make sense of the Godhead. But I don't know if it's necessarily much more than that.
All right, there you go. The hardest question for Trinity Sunday.
And if we still have jobs next week, we'll see you then.
All right, thanks for tuning in.